Honorable Deputy Chairman of Committees, for the 2025 budget for defence, there has been an allocation of 434 billion rupees, which is a 3% increase from the previous year. And for public security and parliamentary affairs, a further 175 billion has been allocated. As far as I'm concerned, Honourable Presiding Member, certainly as far as the Northeast is concerned, the police behaves very much on the instructions of the military, and we don't differentiate between the two. So that figure, I would like to include it with the defence for my analysis. The budget also provides for a significant salary hike for military personnel, ranging from 27% to 33%. Now, why that becomes relevant, Honourable Presiding Member, is that it shows that the government has prioritized the defence establishment to a point where they want to enhance the defence forces. This is in a scenario where there is no war, where the war came to an end over 16, 17 years ago. But despite that, there is that intention to enhance that sector. Now, this is despite, Honourable Presiding Member, the budget deficit reaching 6.7% of the GDP, whilst the target set by the IMF, if I'm not mistaken, is 5.2%. So none of this is helping. It's actually making things worse. And further, the government must increase its revenue collection to 15.1% of GDP to remain eligible for the next IMF tranche of a bailout package. So all of this is increasing the burden very severely. Now, defence very clearly has been prioritized over social welfare. I mean, the figures are quite staggering, Honourable Presiding Member. Social welfare has been slashed to 43 billion rupees. That is slashed by 35 billion compared to last year, at a time when the most vulnerable sections of this country are struggling because of the economic crisis, because of the increasing prices. We are slashing all the sectors that actually need to be enhanced in order to protect and in some way strengthen the most vulnerable. We are doing the opposite. In fact, the IMF recommendations were, and there was a criticism of the previous government that there was not adequate support given to social welfare. So this will terribly affect the very, very vulnerable sections of this country, not just the Northeast. Certainly the Northeast, because if you take GDP, the northern province is the last out of all the provinces. So we are right at the bottom, and we are affected very, very really by these slashes. But what is important, Honourable Presiding Member, now all speakers who spoke before me spoke with regards to the need to strengthen the defence establishment because of Sri Lanka's locality, because it's an island, because of drugs, various other problems that face this region, that you need to strengthen the defence establishment. Let's assume that argument, let's take it at face value, that it has no sinister motive, that it is a genuine question of strengthening for the whole island to ensure that the whole island is secure. But if that is the case, how do you account for this? What I'm going to now place on record. There is a ratio, Honorable Presiding Member, of 1.5 soldiers to every 100 civilians. That is the ratio of Sri Lanka's defense establishment. 1.5 to every 100, right? Minimum of one soldier in the Mullaitivu district. If you take that's the whole island I just told you. If you take the Mullaitivu district, there is a minimum of one soldier for every 2 civilians. One soldier for every 2 civilians. If you take the military, there are 20 divisions. 16 of those divisions are based in the northeast. So how do you look at the security picture? I can understand you making the argument that Sri Lanka must look into the security and defense establishment, we must strengthen it. But what does this mean? What are the demographies of the regions where you have placed your entire military? It's the Tamil-speaking areas. It is the areas that we represent. What is the message you're giving? Who is the enemy? Who is the enemy? When you talk of defense, Honorable Presiding Member, who do you consider the enemy? Now, I can understand previous governments doing it, because this government itself admitted that they were all racist. But that same policy is being pursued today. Surely that can't be right. You came into power saying that you are going to get rid of racism. You're asking us, our party and people who represent the Northeast, to forget about the past, because you are now in power, and that you will ensure that there won't be racism, there won't be hostility towards you. I'm asking you, Honorable Presiding Member, how on earth can you justify 1:2 ratio in a place called Mullaitivu? Don't you feel that that is suffocating? Don't you feel that you are the enemy? That is what the country feels. The country feels that you are an enemy. That's what you're telling the Tamils. Because that is the reality. Now, I am tired, Honorable Presiding Member. Actually, there was a young gentleman who covers parliamentary affairs. So he's been good enough to cover my speeches. And he made a comment. He said, "Sir, I am, I quite appreciate how strongly you bring out the cause of your people. But I'm tired of constantly having to only bring out my people's problems. That I can't feel that I can contribute for the rest of the country. Because that is the burden you have been placing on us. In every field we feel that we are scraping the barrel. And no other field does the message so strongly drive through than the Defense Ministry and the Ministry of Public Security. Because those ministries alone, Honorable Presiding Member, with the way in which they behave in the Northeast, with the policies that these governments, not just previous governments, even this government, because we see no change. That alone, the Ministry of Defense alone, is enough for us to oppose this budget. So that is the way we feel. And if this government feels that they need to change things, and they need to be genuine with regards to the system change that they promised, then that must be the first thing they look at with regards to the Northeast. Now, the speaker who spoke before me, he represents the Vanni district, and the poor honorable member tried very hard to justify the defense allocations and tried to play it down. He represents the Vanni, he represents Mullaitivu. He's a Vanni MP, means Mullaitivu is part of his electorate. He should feel ashamed. He should feel ashamed that he has to justify a 1:2 ratio. Now I honestly ask you, don't you feel claustrophobic? Don't you feel suffocated? Would you accept that in your areas? Would you? And what else does it do? The defense establishment teachers, they are going into schools. They are teaching preschools. I mentioned this even in the budget. The defense establishment employs preschool teachers. The education ministry employs them for 6,000 rupees. The defense establishment employs them for 30,000 in an area where you have had 35 years of war, an area where the economy is scraping the barrel. When you are given a choice between 6,000 and 30,000 or 40,000, which section of preschools would you want to get employed in? Aren't you deliberately, by keeping that difference, militarizing education in the Northeast? What is the intention then? Is this a post-war feeling that you get when you listen to these figures? So, Honorable Presiding Member, this has to change. I am tabling the reports. One is the report which is a fact-check report of this 1:2 ratio. If you take the entire northern province, Honorable Presiding Member, that ratio is 1:10. Mullaitivu is 1:2. Kilinochchi is 1:4. But the overall northern province is 1:10. The entire country is 1.5:100. Who is the enemy? You should feel ashamed, Honorable Presiding Member. Members opposite should feel ashamed. The first thing, if you wanted to get rid of racism, the first thing you should have done is to begin to change this. Then you would have had us believe that there is actually a chance of things happening differently. But you have not done that. You have increased the budget instead. You have increased the budget instead. And despite the fact that we have been coming to this house, raising issues in the consultative committee as well as on the floor of this house, you have not done anything concrete to change. Individual instances that we have brought up, you have not changed. Individual instances, Honorable Mano Ganeshan brought up a few. Nothing has changed. So this has to change, Honorable Presiding Member. And without changing that, to just simply tell us that you will get rid of racism is just hogwash. It means nothing. And therefore we'll be calling for a division and we'll be voting against this budget, both for the defense as well as public security. Thank you.